Well, good evening. Welcome to the Bible study again tonight. It just turned 7 o'clock, and here we are on a beautiful Wednesday night. So glad you are able to join me. And I see we're starting. Patsy Folks just joined us. Patsy, you're the first one, and then boom, the number changed to 4. And Michael Smith is on. We've got some other folks coming on here. It's good to see. Once again, tonight, I don't have Becky with me. She has choir practice and is down at the church involved with that. But it's good to have you all joining me, and I'll just have to read along here as we go. Let me give you a couple of announcements the way we always like to get started. Hi, Gayla. Good to see you. It was good this past Sunday to have all three of our worship services. We had that new combination of the gospel and contemporary styles at 9:30. And then at 11:15, in person was in the sanctuary was the blended traditional service. We had a choir, we had handbells, we even had our orchestra. First time the orchestra had played in quite some time. And then over in the Commons, we had a beautiful service. We used to call it the Rock, but we changed the name to contemporary. The musicians and singers in that thought that rock gave the wrong impression. That's a beautiful service. And so anyhow, we had 3 people join the church on Sunday. All 3 of them joined over in that common service. And it's always good to have new people joining our church. And that makes for a really, really good Sunday. In fact, we've got another couple that are joining the church this Sunday. We may have more, but we have a couple joining this Sunday, and it too is over in that service. A number of people are kind of rotating around and trying different services, and that's a really good idea, especially since there are some changes to our service. Our community cafe starts this next Wednesday. It'll be a week from tonight, and I need to explain about community cafe for just a minute. Because of COVID and this upsurge due to the Delta variant, we are going to make the meals to go only. So from 5 until 6:15, you can drive through, you pick up a meal. We're going to be giving those out at the Commons entrance. The food will be prepared there at the church. It'll be a hot meal. You can come and pick that up. If you want to stay for a class, the classes go from 6 to 7. It just means you eat in your car, or maybe you go down to the scout hut and eat at a picnic table or something, or you can take it home and eat and come back, whatever you'd like to do. But we will have our classes 6 to 7, as well as homework help. For any students who show up needing or wanting help, we'll provide that. We'll be wearing masks and be safely distanced and be just as safe as we can. And then for us, for this group, for this class, hi there, Dan. Good to see you on. And happy birthday to Becky. Thank you, Dan. She's not with us tonight, but I'll pass that along. She's in choir practice and having to go to choir practice on her birthday, but that's she loves getting to do that. I was talking about Fun Day Sunday. I was talking about our community cafe. For this group, our classes or our small groups will be over at 7 o'clock, and boom, at 7 o'clock, I'm going to pop on the screen with Facebook Live. So come and join us. And instead of these books in the background in my study at home, you're probably going to see a white wall in a classroom, because I'm going to be in room M5, and that'll go 7 to 7:45. And I think I told you this last week, but I've selected a study called "What Does It Mean to Be a Christian?" And in that, I've taught this before a couple of times, but it's been a little while since we did it. And I hope you find this interesting. What we're going to do is look at all of those things that unite us as Christians. What do we believe about salvation, for example? What do we believe about Scripture? What do we believe what do we believe about the sacraments, or so many other things? And what we'll discover as Baptists and Catholics and Lutherans and Methodists and Presbyterians and Church of Christ, there are so much of our beliefs that are held together. We share those. They're Christian, basic Christian beliefs. And as we go through that, we'll talk about a few of the differences. Well, the Baptists would emphasize this, or the Catholics would have 7 sacraments, where the Methodists have 2. We'll talk about differences sometimes, but I will not emphasize Methodist beliefs and practices. But as soon as we finish, after 5 or 6 weeks of what does it mean to be a Christian and talking about basic Christian theology and beliefs and practices, then I'll shift gears and we'll talk about who are we as United Methodists. And there we will lift up the Methodist part. We'll talk a lot about how we view things like grace and salvation, and we'll talk about the little nuances, the differences that we emphasize that maybe another denomination doesn't emphasize. So I never, ever criticize or put down what another denomination believes. We may not believe like someone else, but we don't have to be disagreeable with them. They have very good reasons for what they believe. So we'll get into all that next week. It'll go like our regular time. You just go right to Christ Church's Facebook page, and we'll be there live. If I'm not there live at 7, I'll be there at 7:01. I may come running down the hall from helping. I'm a homework helper, and so I may come running in from high school calculus or algebra 2 or something into to the class. But I'll be there as soon after 7 as I can, but hopefully I'll be there set up and ready to go at 7. That's my plan. Okay, tonight we're concluding our study on John. You don't have to pay for any of those announcements. Those commercials are absolutely free, no extra charge. But tonight we're finishing up our study of John. I hope you have enjoyed this. I almost said John is my favorite gospel. Whatever I'm studying is my favorite, I think. Luke may be my favorite, actually, but boy, John is so rich in theology. We've studied Jesus' teachings. We've studied Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. I'm the bread of life. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. John has so many I am statements in this gospel with deep meaning as to what's behind those statements. We saw Jesus go through John's version of the Last Supper. We saw and read about the crucifixion, horrible as it was, and the burial. We read about the beauty and the wonder and the amazement and almost shock of the resurrection, as first the women and then the apostles discovered that Christ indeed was risen. He had told them, on the 3rd day I'll rise again, but they just couldn't quite grasp that. Understandably, they couldn't quite grasp it. So, let me ask you what the end of chapter 20 sounded like last week. We read that, and when I read those last couple of verses at the end of chapter 20, you might look at that now. In fact, I'll read it again. Tell me what this sounds like. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. It almost sounds like he should say, blessings on you, amen, right? That sounds like the end. It sounds like the end of the gospel. And we talked just a little bit last week about how some scholars think that John, the Apostle John, wrote this gospel. He explained at the end, I've written this so that you can believe. We said gospels always have a purpose. Not only do they teach us about Jesus' life, his teachings, his actions, but they also want to convince us that Jesus was and is the Christ, the Son of God. And John has stated that. I've told you all these things so that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, and that by believing you might have eternal life. And so, I just got a text from Ann Christopher saying that Paul is home. He's been in the hospital getting some tests, and it's awesome to see that pop up on the phone that I'm using here. So good to hear that Paul is home. Been praying for him. That wasn't the end of the gospel. It sounds like the end, but a lot of scholars say that John did end it there. And then a few years later, he thought, you know, there's some things that happened after Jesus' resurrection while he was on earth that I need to share with believers. And so he wrote chapter 21. We don't know that that's the case. He may have just written it this way all at once, but I like to think that maybe he did add this, and I am so glad that he added, or that he gave us chapter 21, because it has some very important things in it. One of the theories as to why John added chapter 21 is that people say, they began to say that Jesus rose in a spiritual sense, but didn't rise from the dead in a physical sense. We say in our Apostles' Creed, that was a heresy soon after Jesus' death, that he really didn't rise in the body. And we say in the Apostles' Creed that we believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. Whenever we declare we believe in eternal life, we say we believe that we rise again in a body, not necessarily the one that we have, but I think John may have wanted in chapter 21 to refute that heresy and to make sure that we understand that Jesus rose, yes, probably in a different, with a different type of appearance, but it was a physical body. So now, and there's other things in this that we'll share as we go through. His interface with Peter, Jesus' interface with Peter is so powerful in this. I'm going to read chapter 21, verses 1 through 6. And my Bible has a heading, as so many do, and it says, Jesus and the miraculous catch of fish. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. And my Bible has a footnote that says Tiberias. So your translation may be the Sea of Tiberias. It's the Greek name for it. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish. Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out, and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Wow. Okay, there's a lot to glean from this fishing trip. Excuse me. I've got somebody calling me, and I'm guessing that they probably want to help me extend the warranty on my car or truck. I'm getting a lot of that these days. Plus, people wanting to buy our house. I bet you are getting those calls too. We know that some time has passed here because the apostles are no longer in Judea. Where are they? Where does this scene take place? Somebody post, or maybe a few of you will do that to let me know where are they in this scene. Jesus had appeared to them before. In fact, this is the 3rd time he's appeared to them. And on both of the other times when he appeared, it was in Jerusalem. But this time it's somewhere else. Where? Come on and tell me, where is this scene? Where does it take place? It's so hard for me to be patient and to wait until I see those comments start to pop up. Thank you, Tommy Sutherland, by the Sea of Galilee. Exactly right. Here they are up north, and this is where these guys have come from. It mentions one of them from Cana of Galilee, and that's in Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. Thank you, Greg. Peter and Andrew, James and John, they first met Jesus on the Sea of Galilee, sitting by the sea, mending their nets. They were fishermen, and so we're not sure what's happened here. We're going to take a few guesses at it. Peter and Andrew, James and John were commercial fishermen, and So we're not sure what's happened. Maybe they have decided to return to their old jobs. You know, Jesus said, "Come with me, I'll make you fishers of people." And they had gone and had been fishers of people. I wonder if they've become discouraged and said, "Well, it's over. Let's go back to earning our living as fishermen." I don't think that's the case, but I've heard that said before. You know, that they'd kind of given up, and so they're returning to other life. There's 7 of these apostles that decided to go fishing. Did you notice how they decided to go fishing? There's an interesting bit of dynamic or chemistry that's going on here. He gives us some insight into this little body. Dan says, "Sure not the Dead Sea." That's right. You wouldn't be catching any fish in the Dead Sea. It is dead. It's totally briny and salty, and no living fish in that. But it's like the disciples don't decide individually, "I think I'll go fishing," and then they just happen to meet down at the shore and decide to go. They're kind of, I get the idea they're kind of hanging around, and Peter says, "I'm going fishing. Think I'll go fishing." And it's like the others go, "Then we'll go too." This is showing us something. Thank you, Michael. Peter said he was going, and now they go as a group. They're doing things together. Jesus would have been happy to have seen that they're doing these things as a group. And it's it's like Lynn says, Peter wants to go, so the others say they'll go along. Peter's leadership is already coming out. You've been around people before. Even this happens with children, where someone who's kind of a natural leader will say, I'd like to go do so-and-so, and a lot of other people say, "Well, I'll go too." And so they go. In one of the other Gospels, Jesus says, "Tell my apostles to meet me in Galilee." It's not that's not recorded here in John, but I wonder if maybe that's exactly what happened. They saw him in Jerusalem. Now they've gotten the word to go ahead of him to Galilee. They got there, and they're just kind of hanging out, waiting for Jesus to appear. And in that time, Peter decided, "Well, we got to earn some keep here. Why don't we go fishing? Let's get our nets. Let's go out and go fishing." It's a way to earn some money. It's a way to pass some time while they wait to see Jesus. Fishing at night was common. Something else that was common was that somebody would stand or sit in the bow of the boat with a torch and hold it over in order to see the fish. Sometimes the light would attract fish, and they would direct, throw the net to the left or throw the net to the right. When someone from the shore, when there was enough light for people to see from the shore, it was also common, if you fished close to shore, to have someone say to you, "Hey, there's a school of fish on the other side of the boat, cast it over." And so when Jesus calls out and says, "Hey guys, do you have any fish?" And they go, "No, fished all night, don't have any." And then he says, "Well, cast on the other side." They probably didn't think much about it. It's like, okay, he's being helpful. And so they do. And he comes up with this incredible catch. The nets are so full. So let's read on. I'm going to read 7, 8, and 9. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, in other words, John says, "It's the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him. In parentheses it says, "For he had taken it off." It's like rolling up your pant legs. That would be similar to an air culture, or taking off your coat if you were in the water. He wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water, out of the boat into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. That explains how Jesus saw the fish, or why they weren't surprised when he saw fish. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, there with fish on it, and some bread. We need to talk about that. I love the way John refers to himself as the disciple Jesus loved, without ever speaking of himself, I, me, himself in the first person. Peter immediately heads to the shore to see Jesus, puts his outer garment on, heads to the shores. Those are about 100 yards out. A lot of people say that the apostles in the boat represent the church. Oh, wow. That's a beautiful bit of symbolism. If that's the case, what do we get from this? In other words, if the boat with these apostles in it, they're fishing, they're working, and Jesus calls out to them and says, hey, cast your net here. You'll catch a bunch of fish. They do. They catch a bunch of fish. How might that represent the church? Or if it does represent the church, maybe a better question is, what are we supposed to learn from that? We're church, right? Doesn't matter if we're in the same local church. We've got different churches represented here. By the time this airs on our website, we'll have churches all over represented as people in other places have a way of watching this. So what do we learn from it, church? I think there's some things that we ought to kind of listen up and say, wait, John may have a lesson for us here. Somebody want to take a shot at that? We are, as the church, fishing for people, right? Christ can tell us where to cast our nets. Yes. If we listen, Christ will point us toward people who need Christ. Rewards of following the truth. Yes. All these fish that they catch. Yes, the church needs to fish like that. A sign, feeding the 5,000, follow Christ's lead. Thank you all. Tommy says we're in the same boat. Yes, we better be united, hadn't we, Tommy? We better be rowing in the same direction. The church needs to be in the same boat. Even if we're in different local churches, we're Christian. We're believers together. Even if we're different denominations, we're believers together. And the church should always be listening to the voice of Christ, Christ's direction, showing us where to do ministry, showing us how to do ministry. Somebody said where to cast our nets. That's exactly right. And to remember that Christ sees us fishing. Christ knows that we're the church. We're not in this thing alone. Here at Christ Church, we do something every 3 to 5 years, and we haven't done it in a while, and that's form a futures team. And the futures team gets together. We look at population growth around us. We look at demographics around us. We look at how the population around us, the communities around us, might need some things that the church can offer. In fact, we think a lot about what ministries are we not providing that maybe people need. Our lead ministry at Christ Church came out of a futures team report that says, families oftentimes need homework help. And so we form this team, and we look at all kinds of things like that, and then we develop some plans for new ministries. And then we'll say, well, does that require more staffing or different staffing? How does it affect that? What does it mean about resources? We used to ask, what does it mean for buildings? Do we need more classrooms? Do we need a larger kitchen? Do we need a sanctuary? All those things came through futures reports. But the most, and we started a new futures team last Thursday night. A group of people and I met at the church. Out of all the things we'll do as a futures team, the most important thing we'll do is listen to Christ. Keep our eye on the shore where he's saying, cast your net here. Hey, get this net. Do these things, and we will help people find me, find Christ, and be disciples. Jesus had a fire going, and that fire had some fish and bread on it. Do you see the significance of that? I find it kind of interesting. He's on the shore by himself. It's just getting daylight. These guys have fished all night. They come quietly paddling in their fishing boat. In fact, they're so close to the shore that Peter can hop out and walk in. He wasn't walking on water. He's walking on the bottom. But here they are coming into the shore, and here they discover that Jesus has a campfire going. He's there. I can just envision there's a few stones put together, pieces of broken up wood, and it's cooked down to embers, and he's cooking bread, and he's cooking fish. There's some great not just symbolism, there's some great meaning in that. I think it means that Jesus was about to eat. He's physically going to eat. He's preparing food. Yeah, that's right, Dan. There is a clue there. Here's this physical presence of Christ. They can touch him and feel him. They can see him. He may be able to walk through locked doors, but there's a physicality about him. And here he's about to prepare. He is preparing his breakfast and is about to eat. He sends them, says, hey, bring some of your fish here. It's such a cool thing. He is inviting them to eat with him. Let me see here. I'm going to read 10 through 14. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. What a beautiful scene. I can just imagine Peter running back, getting that net, reaching in, getting some of the fish. They cleaned them, dressed them, put them on the fire with Jesus' fish. Now everyone is about to enjoy a good breakfast together. I find it interesting also that they didn't dare ask him who he was. Let's see. Dr. William Barclay, in his commentary on John, says an interesting thing. He says, biologists who have studied Galilee, the Sea of Galilee at that time, say that now this is no coincidence, that there were 153 species of fish there. And if that's the case, it's interesting that John would say, and in that net were large fish, 153. If there were 153 species of fish and they catch 153 fish, what do you suppose the significance? Diane just says, is there significance to that? To the 153? Dr. William Barclay would say, absolutely. Dr. Barclay would say, there's room in the net of the church for every species. For every person, there is room for us in the church. That the church is universal, that it's meant for everybody. If there was 153 species of fish and 153, we might surmise from that there was one of every species. And that says the church would be very diverse. Room for all people. Thank you. It's exactly right. All are included. The nets are not torn. And that says it can hold us. It is. Thank you, Tommy. It is for everyone. We can all be together in the church and retain our identity as people. I love that twist that Dr. Barclay helps us to see there. They didn't dare ask who he was. I think John says that because he looks different. It's not like, it's a no-brainer, that's Jesus. But I think I think he looks different, and yet they know it's the Christ. This is who he is now. And so they gather around. John tells us this is the third time since, do you remember the other two times that Jesus saw the apostles? John says this is the third time that Jesus had appeared to them. Okay? It is, according to this gospel. There are other sightings in other gospels, but in John's gospel, this is the third time. You remember the other two? Both of them took place in Jerusalem, and they're marked by the absence and then the presence of one of the apostles. In other words, there's an appearance of Jesus before the apostles. Somebody's missing. And then there's a second appearance of Jesus before the apostles, and that person who was missing is now present. And it brought up a very powerful lesson. I'm trying my best to wait for a comment here, knowing that it's going to take a few seconds for my words to get through the airwaves and out to you all, and then somebody's going to type in a comment or two, and it'll come back to me, and I'll see that. I try not to. Oh yeah, Dan Young says Thomas. That's the one. He was missing at the first appearance, and then when the apostles said, "Thomas, we've seen the Lord," he goes, "I don't know. I can't believe until I touch the places in his hands and put my hand in the wound in his side." And so then Jesus appeared another time, a second time, and said, "Thomas, it's me." And it says, because Thomas saw, he believed. And Jesus complimented that. He gently chided Thomas. Thomas, you believe now because you have seen, but more blessed are those who will believe and who will never be able to see. Yep, that's where we give you the name Doubting Thomas. But Jesus taught us in those two appearances that those who come after the apostles will have to believe without ever seeing. And so now Jesus has appeared here in Galilee. This writer, John, doesn't tell us about Jesus appearing to the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. That is told to us in Luke. But yeah, we have to believe by faith. So now let's see. I'm going to pick up and read verses 15 through 19. I'm reading it all tonight. Don't want to leave any of this good stuff out. When they had finished eating, get that, they sat, they had a meal together, fish and bread. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Think about what "more than these" refers to. Help me out with that. "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Saying Simon, son of John, he would have said Simon Bar Jonah, Simon, son of John. That's like saying, "David Hall, do you love me?" In fact, that's like saying, "William David Hall, do you love me?" It's a very formal way to address to address Peter, son of John. Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Then Jesus goes on to say, "Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Wow. Now this is a powerful, powerful scene that we only have here in the Gospel of John. Sometimes it's easier to understand Scripture if we kind of close our eyes and picture the scene. That's one technique for Bible study, especially when there are things in it that can help us to picture what was going on there. Well, Courtney Rushworth is watching tonight. Good to see you on as well, Courtney. I'm going to just imagine for a minute what this would have looked like. And I'm tainted because I've been to the Sea of Galilee, and there's a little place on the Sea of Galilee just outside the city of Capernaum where there's a church that's been built there. It's called Peter's Priory, and it's supposedly, traditionally, is built on the site where Jesus had prepared that breakfast, where the apostles had breakfast with him, and where Jesus talked to Peter. That scene naturally comes to mind. Just picture being kind of on the sand, a shore of a lake, Sea of Galilee. We've just had breakfast. The smoke is still coming from that fire. You can smell the smoke. And I picture that Jesus leans over and just doesn't start talking in front of the apostles, but says to him, Peter, let's go take a walk. I don't think this is the kind of discussion Jesus would have had with everyone hearing. I think we know about this because Peter shared it. I think later, in fact, he may have shared it with John personally. John is going to follow them along the shore. And then Jesus began to ask. That smoke, Peter can smell that. And everybody's kind of full and satisfied. And so they're happy to sit on the shore while Jesus and Peter stroll away. I wonder what he meant when he said, Peter, do you love me more than these? What do you think? Peter, do you love me? That's his first question. Simon Bar-Jonah, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? We don't know what he meant, but we can kind of guess. Put up an answer if you have an opinion on that. Peter, Simon Peter, why do you love me more than these? And Peter responds, well, of course I love you. You know that. And the more than these, one way of interpreting that is to say, Peter, do you love me more than these other apostles love me? Peter was impetuous, and he absolutely would have said, well, of course I do. I love you more than anybody else could possibly love you. There's another theory that Jesus meant when he says, do you love me more than these? And he sort of held his hands out. Okay, thank you, Dan, the other apostles. That's probably the number one thing. Do you love me more than these? And pointed to the fishing boat and the net and the things of another occupation or profession. Do you love me more than that and what they bring you? Those would have brought Peter some good material things. Do you love me more than this worldly stuff that you're thinking about going back to? Peter says, I love you. And Jesus says, feed my lambs. Wow. Okay. He's going to ask him again. Wonder why I asked him 3 times. Ah, yes. Gayla's right on it. Material things. Yes. Earthly things. That was Jane, I believe. Yeah. Do you love me more than these? We could, anywhere we are in the world, we can say, do you love me more than these? And you look around and you see stuff. And I wonder if Jesus was saying, you love me more than stuff? Because if you do, Peter, and you follow me, it's going to be hard. Michael says, forgiving him for rebuking him 3 times. Peter has denied him 3 times. Right? 3 times. And now Jesus says, do you love me? And Peter says, well, yes. Then feed my sheep. First, my lambs. Peter, do you love me? Yep, the denial happened 3 times. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. Why would you ask me again? Yeah, it is symbolic, Lynn. Then feed my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? Oh, my goodness. By this time, he's offended by it. But I'm wondering if at some point in that, Peter didn't think, he just asked me the 3rd time. I smell this smoke, and it reminds me of the smoke of that fire down in Jerusalem when I was warming myself, and the servant girl said, you are one of them. I can tell by your accent. You're a Galilean. And he swore. He brought curses down and said, I don't even know who he is. And then Peter wept. I wonder if maybe he's remembering this by now. Why would you ask me? Of course I love you. Then, Peter, take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep. Second response was take care of my sheep. Peter is being given the responsibility to care for the church. When Jesus says, feed my lambs, he's referring to believers who are vulnerable, perhaps new believers. They're vulnerable. maybe and Dan's tying this back to the Trinity, which very well may be part of this. But I think Jesus is helping Peter to remove that failure from his mind and to move on, with a commission. That's exactly right. He gives him this commission to take care of the church, the sheep, the lambs, you might say the flock. He's going to be the shepherd. He's going to be the leader, the caregiver, the director of the early church. And this is where he gets that, what we call commission. When he says you'll stretch out your hands and they'll take you where you don't want to go, he's not talking about you're going to be old and go into a retirement home, a nursing home. He's saying they're going to take you to a place of execution, Peter. They're going to stretch out your hands. He's referring to death by crucifixion. And Peter would die by crucifixion. Church tradition says that happened in Rome, and Peter asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't want to have the honor of dying exactly like his Lord died. It's interesting to me that John would include this in his gospel. It follows then, and Peter's turns and says, this is at verse 20, saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. See, they're walking along the shore. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and said, Lord, who's going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he asked, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. Because of this, the rumor spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? John's explaining, guys, I'm going to die too. I've lived to a ripe old age, but I have not gotten a promise that I will live until the second coming. That's not what Jesus said. There's this rumor. And yes, Jesus said, what is it to you, Peter, if he lives until I return? I think what Jesus was saying to Peter was, Peter, tend to your knitting, right? Peter, you've got a job to do. I just gave you a commission. Feed my sheep. Don't worry about somebody else's. That is so important in the church. It is so easy for us to start looking at others and their job and how they do their work and what they should be doing and lose sight of our ministry. All of us have ministries. All of us have gifts. Yeah, it's good to be doing things together. We do it as a team, but we need to focus on our work. And so Jesus is reminding Peter, stay focused, Peter, on your work. Don't worry about John's. Let John and me take care of that. I want to read the last verses of this as well. This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. John never says it's me. John is treating himself as if he's the third person. And then he says this powerful statement that does end the gospel. Jesus did many other things as well. In other words, I can't tell you about all the things he did. In fact, he says, if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. It's a beautiful way for us to say, Jesus' power is endless, it's infinite, and what he did on earth, I just have this impression that it was packed. Every day he's doing this healing, he's touching this person, he's forgiving this sin, he's teaching this lesson, he's preaching this sermon, he's demonstrating how we do these things. And John says, I was with him through 3 years of that. And if I tried to write all of those down, there's not enough paper, there's not enough ink to do it. It's a beautiful way to say, this is not it. This gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they give us a sampling of what Jesus did in his ministry. Very, very important sampling. It's important that we read it and study it and understand this Christ, to grow closer to him, to know him personally. But don't ever think that we know it all because we've read 4 Gospels. Well, guys, I have enjoyed this study of John. It's always a good study, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. It's been good to have so many of you make all these sessions, and so I hope you can be with me next week when we cover what it means to be a Christian. We'll refer to Scripture, but we won't be in a particular book of the Bible. We'll be looking at what does it mean, what do Christians believe, what's our doctrine, what's our theology, and we will not be divisive. We will not be claiming that any denomination or church or group has superior knowledge to any other, because we all, Christians together, we are studying and working and learning and growing together. Thank you all, and I'm going to pass along those happy birthday wishes to Becky when she gets in from choir practice. Thank you all. It's been a super study for me. Good night.